Good morning, and thank you for being here. This next in advising session was inspired by, was a direct result of a Center for Teaching Excellence book club in the spring of 2022. It was a collaboration that our own Jessamine Newhouse cultivated with the SUNY Oswego. And so we have been participating in joint book clubs ever since. It's been a wonderful opportunity. And I wanted to extend that book club into something else and give it more, it has a lot of heuristic value. Joining me today for this session are three, what I would call relationship-rich faculty and fellow book club member alums. So would you wave Michelle Willette from PR and Journalism Department in the School of Arts and Sciences, Kim McCoy-Coleman from Social Work in the School of Education, Health, and Human Services, and Wanda Carroll, Supply Chain Management. Oh, thank you for impressive and International Business School of Business and Economics. I thank them because without hesitation, when I put out a call to book club members, they said yes. I'm really grateful for their willingness to present today. The ideas and terms we'll share today, Hugh Wanda, come from a 2020 publication by Peter Felten and Leo Lambert called Relationship-Rich Education, How Human Connections Drive Success in College. The book club in 2022, and I don't even know if Jessamine could have predicted this, was so well-timed because we were coming out of peak pandemic with a drastically changing educational landscape and a much heightened awareness of student needs and student profiles. The overall student experience of college was changing, and we were more attuned to that and to each other. And it was also perfectly timed and resonant with the pillars that support our Plattsburgh Next strategic plan. I will provide an overview of the text that Wanda had just showed you, and lay out more the framework, the major tenets of what relationship-rich education is. And then I'll turn it over to our three panelists who will each share roughly 5 minutes or so with you of the content that meant the most to them and how they have applied or how we can apply to classroom, to focus on academic advising, but it really does apply to all of our work, no matter what your role is on campus or relationship with students. I will be sharing slides with you, though the presentation is not heavily slide-based. They're going to be speaking about passages that meant the most to them, and I wanted you to have those prompts for you, those visual prompts, so you can adjust your screen however you wish if you want to see their beautiful faces more, slides less, or vice versa, and alternate. At the end, what I'll do is I'll provide a couple summative comments and reactions to what they shared. And then with whatever time remains in our 50 minutes together, we'll engage in any discussion or reactions and questions. I would like to open the space today by talking about two individuals. The first one is Dr. Leanne Wolf, and she was my undergraduate advisor at Heidelberg University, a small liberal arts institution in Ohio. Pictured here on the right is Dr. Wolf post-retirement, and one in the center is when I visited my alma mater in July of 2012 for my sorority's 50th anniversary. That was my sorority's 50th anniversary, not my 50th anniversary, just want that on video. And after the sorority event, I I made sure to have made arrangements with her to visit her at her home. And lucky was I that I visited her in 2012 as she passed away in 2013 after a long illness. And very characteristic of her, she far outlived her prognosis. Dr. Wolf was a woman of exacting standards and high expectation, but also deep caring. I had her for 6 classes. She was tough. In fact, she made up an award for me for prevailing in all of her classes, earning A-range grades. A crystal apple was the symbol that she gave me, and I do not have the crystal apple any longer. I handed it down to an advisee of mine who had me for 8 classes here. So she wins the award for taking the most number of Burnett classes. So she loves the fact that, Terry Ann is her name, loves the fact that she's got something from her grand advisor. I could tell you all sorts of stories about Dr. Wolf, but I'm only going to tell one now that stands out. There was in the upper level classes we were in, they were very small size classes. And there was a guy named Rob in the class, hit on every woman in the class and perhaps campus, fraternity guy, pretty much a goofball. And he didn't show up to class. And she took offense to this. And she packed us up and marched us over to his residence hall, where she proceeded to conduct class. And when they were eye to eye, Dr. Wolf and Rob, there was deafening silence, as you would imagine. And she said to him, "If you can't bring Muhammad to the mountain, you bring the mountain to Muhammad." And all he said was, "Yes, ma'am." I don't think he ever missed again. And she never spoke of that again. But he did, because I read it recently in a press piece from Heidelberg University when it was announced that he was the newest member, elected as the newest member to the College Council. I thought she was old school and uber conservative. She was tough. But only in that 2012 visit and posthumously did I realize that she was a powerful and lifelong civically engaged woman, voting rights activist, and a pioneer in the first year experience course. She proposed it to the state of Ohio in 1971. I was in a first year experience course and she was my instructor. Total Student Development was called, TSD. She, widely known as Mother Wolf, remains an illustration for me about how you can have both high standards and deep caring. And I miss her very much. The second individual from our own campus is Penny Kendall. If you worked here or studied here in 2014 or prior, you know her. Longtime Clinton dining hall, right at the entry, the swipe card and cash register person. Now retired in Florida, students still speak of her and their connection to Penny. Student athletes especially, as she attended contests, kept up with teams, but also all students. She knew the gory details of their relationships, drinking binges, and struggles with life at college. Her retirement made the papers, went viral on social media, as you see pictured here. Neither Dr. Wolf nor Ms. Kendall intended to influence the masses and mean the most to certain individuals, but they did anyway because they had something. In the transactional nature of their work, and you can't get more transactional at a cash register, they each built and sustained rich relationships. We underestimate the power of the social support we provide, large or small, upon the recipients. And just this week, Michelle Willett shared with me an article, a briefing from PSY Post, about Dungan and Associates' recent research that as a whole, we undervalue the power of the support we provide others and we provide to the recipient. And that can often be a barrier for us expressing it more. So my academic advisor and my penny, which by the way was Harriet, she knew my number at the swipe card thing was 0058. She memorized our numbers. They are two examples in my life of how I felt important all the time. The author's interview research was performed prior to the pandemic. And they thought, oh no, now we have the pandemic and the book's being released in 2020. But the ideas have as much applicability or more applicability now. So here's the nature of relationship-rich education. And I'm taking the words, although not verbatim all the time, but I'm taking the words from a special Zoom that Jessamine and the CELT directors at SUNY Oswego hosted for us, where one of the authors, Peter Felten, conducted a Zoom with us, and we could ask questions, and we did breakouts, and some of you were there. And I watched also their interviews from Elon University and many of them. And in it, and so I can't do a better presentation than they do, but I'm certainly going to share what's consistent among their renderings, and that is the four big ideas associated with that undergird relationship-rich education. And it's predicated on prior research findings that students who are steeped in high-quality relationships also have higher levels of a wide variety of outcomes, such as belongingness, motivation, learning, identity development, even increased voting record, success, overall wellness, and for the college, retention and graduation rates. And the stakes are higher, they found. The effect is greater of relationships for BIPOC and first-generation college students, both positive and negative, that rich relationships for BIPOC and first-generation students matter more, and the lack of them are injurious more. Relationship-rich education occurs when a campus environment or culture prioritizes, and this is the key point, it prioritizes the development of meaningful connections in every corner and domain of college life. Peers, with staff, and especially faculty. There are four principles that the book and their ideas are based around. And they are these. The first is that rich relationships make students feel relentlessly welcomed, that they matter, that they belong here, that they are cared for, beyond orientation and beyond welcome week and beyond the first get to know you speeches in the class, beyond that, relentlessly, that the student feels that they are not anonymous. You see, their self-doubt doesn't wane after week one. So the more we can continue that welcome throughout their Plattsburgh career, it helps to counter those self-doubts that are, I think, increasingly heavy in this day and age. The second principle is that rich relationships inspire students to learn. If they know the college, especially their faculty, want them to succeed, believe that they can succeed, students are inspired not to let their faculty down. In doing so, they don't let themselves down. They're more likely to invest their whole being if they believe we acknowledge their whole beings. They're more likely to work harder if they know you believe they are capable of good work. The third of four principles is that and students say this all the time, that rich relationships are best being a part of a web of significant connections. You don't have to have a strong relationship with every student and with every advisee, but we play a role in encouraging connections with and referring to students for purposes they seek. It's a web of significant connections. And the fourth principle is that rich relationships contribute to the student's transformation and identity development. Students are on a journey here, and they are testing out who they are. They are asking questions of who am I really? And bringing that out through deep, meaningful relationships, you're not leaving their identity development to chance, to a purely closeted or introspective process, and certainly you're not leaving it to a social media process either. These are the four big ideas. There's obviously much more to it. The challenges to it, the possibilities for it, the manifestations of it. And for an explication of these ideas, now's when I turn to our three guest panelists, because each one will share some of what meant the most to them, the implications, and they're focusing on, but not limited to, academic advising, because any person on this campus plays a role in relationship-rich education. After all panelists have shared their thoughts, then I'll close and we'll open it up for question and answers. So I first turn to Michelle Willett.
There we go. Thanks, Elizabeth. So, reflecting back on my own experience, I went to two colleges. I went to the local community college first, and I did not want to go there. I wanted to go to the University of Minnesota, the really big college in my state. And so I was kind of disappointed to go to the community college, but I had a scholarship and wanted to take advantage of it. And then after 2 years, I went on to University of Colorado at Boulder, which is itself the size of a city. And interestingly to me, I wound up loving the community college far more than I did Boulder. People knew your name. Your teachers would remember you. You weren't lost in the crowd. And when I went to Boulder, it was a lot more transactional because of the numbers. And because, it's just easy to get lost. I'm going to date myself. I was there during the time that we switched to computer registration. And it was dial-up modem. And there were lines all the way across campus for people who couldn't, because the phone lines went down because there were so many people calling in. And I just remember I was an RA at the time. And my students just felt demoralized and like they weren't important and they wanted to quit. And I really couldn't blame them at that point. So sometimes we forget about the importance of even just saying, how are you? Having someone recognize us as people. And I mean, we really know this, right? Because when we are dealing with our supervisors or our peers, if someone is just coming to you asking for you to do things and talking to you about whether or not you did them well, you're not happy to be there. You don't really want to show up. We want people to recognize us as human beings. It's just a fundamental need. And I think the pandemic has really brought that out. I like Matt Smith's comment from the textbook. He says, students want to know that you see them beyond just as a student in your class, on your campus, and that you care about them just beyond their academic success. And so that initial interaction, as you're starting up with them, in the beginning, your relationship is really important. You need to build trust and understanding. And so just taking time when the student walks in the door, do you dive in and do you just plow through and say, what classes are you planning to take? Or do you just take 2 seconds and say, how are you doing? I know this is kind of tough. There's a lot going on. How are you doing? And recognize them. And I know too that with too many advisees, some people have huge loads. Finding time for conversation can be difficult. But I don't think most of the time it really takes too much for somebody to let them know you see them as a human being beyond just a brain on a stick. So one of the things that I'm actually going to experiment with this semester is as we gear up to advising, I sent all of my advisees a little questionnaire. I'm hoping to get in writing from them just a few notes about how they're doing academically, if they're connecting with people, if they feel like they've got support for their academics, that sort of thing. And I'm hoping that what that does is it makes my meeting time a little more efficient. I'm sure some people will come without filling it out. That's fine. I'm hoping that the people who do need it fill it out, and it jumpstarts our conversation and helps us move through things more efficiently while still recognizing them as human beings. I also thought it was interesting the stats about first generation students. It said that the poll that they did uncovered a disturbing gap. First generation college students are more likely to report having 0 influential relationships. 15% of them did that. Than those with a college educated parent, 6%. To me, that was pretty shocking. I can't imagine going through college with 0 influential relationships. I mean, how would you survive? And while 29% of students with a college-educated parent reported 7 or more significant relationships with faculty or staff, this was true for only 17% of first-generation students. So if you have an idea that a student might be a first-generation student, and I don't think you're going to know that necessarily, but sometimes you may have that idea, you may want to map out a few extra minutes with that student and try to talk about relationships and where they're finding them and how they're navigating that socially as well as academically. Are there clubs they're joining? Are they talking to other students from class? Are they building study groups? I also found interesting the idea in the text that men may need some extra attention because they have trouble bringing their authentic self. If no one knows you as who you truly are, that's a pretty lonely existence. So it might not hurt to take a minute with some of our men to make sure that they're connecting up as well. And then there was a quote from David Latimer on page 41 and 42 that I felt like it got to the heart of things. Students fear failure and being challenged beyond their limits. They may not have been challenged academically in high school, and for the first time are really experiencing academic rigor. They fear embarrassing their families, being afraid to come home and say, I am not achieving in college right now. I am struggling. They fear talking to a professor because a professor represents an intimidating authority figure. They're not sure how to approach them. They also resist asking for help or asking for a tutor because utilizing a tutor is perceived as not being smart. They do not want to go to counseling when they have emotional problems because that's for people who are weak. The fear of shame is everywhere. And I actually think that's amplified for students from minoritized backgrounds. Because often if they are first gen, their families are holding them up as examples for other people. And, and there is stigma against, even more stigma against seeking help often. So one thing maybe we ought to do, if we are limited in the amount of time that we have to spend with everyone, I kind of hate to say it, but maybe we schedule our time in such a way, as much as we can, that we plan a little extra time with some of these people in these groups, or plan some follow-ups with them just to kind of make sure, because they are more at risk. I'm thinking of an interaction I had with a student the other day who's not doing well. And I know she was troubled. We were trying to set an appointment to look at why her grades are where they are and where she can get things back on track. But as she headed out the door, I just stopped to tell her, you are enough. What you bring to this, you are enough. It's just time for us to figure out how to set things up for success. Yeah, I know you don't feel like you are enough sometimes, but you are. And she paused and she just looked at me and she kind of teared up. And she said, thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you so much. Your last points are a perfect segue to Kim McCoy Coleman's words that were largely drawn from chapter 2 on why is this so hard?
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Elizabeth. Why is this so hard? One of the things that inspired me about this book was realizing that we struggle with the same feelings and pressures that our advisees and our students do. In chapter 2, the authors highlight how students can be paralyzed and feel mortified by comparison and insecurity. As someone who's up for tenure in January, so can I. And I'm guessing you can too. Imposter syndrome and shame make it feel difficult to connect with others or to ask for help when we need it, as Michelle was saying. This is true for our advisees, it's true for me, and perhaps it's true for you. Shame and fear are also highly correlated with depression and anxiety, clinical depression and anxiety. It correlates with our advisees' mental health, and it sure correlates with mine. For me, one of the key takeaways from this text is that a main reason why this is so hard is because we don't recognize the truly reciprocal relationship, truly reciprocal nature of relationships. When I read the title of this book, I could only imagine people responding, as I tended to, in one of two ways. One, well, that's axiomatic. Obviously, relationships are important to education, right? And to sort of brush it off as self-evident. The second reaction is, great. It's not enough that I have to teach and advise, but now I have to offer relationships to everyone, right? Which was also part of my original reaction. Another something to do. Relationships are not something that you offer or give to students. Relationships are not something you're being asked to do on top of everything else. You are always already in relationship with your students and your advisees. How you tend to those relationships can shape everything. Everything else in that student's world, in your world, and in our world. Where this book falls short, in my opinion, is that it talks about a very Western notion of relationships in a very individualistic way, sometimes linear. It also uses the word relational, but it doesn't really capture a non-Western idea of relationality. Okay, bear with me for a second here. But genuine relationality recognizes that we are all interconnected. And those interconnections are reciprocal and dynamic and real. We are interconnected with each other, our students, our advisees, the environment, the world, and the cosmos. Relationality, true relationality, refers to the connectedness we experience and share with all living things. Spratnik in 2011 says that all entities in the natural world, including us, are thoroughly relational beings of great complexity, who are both composed of and nested within contextual networks of dynamics and reciprocal relationships. We're made entirely of relationships, as in the whole of the natural world. If we take that definition and we consider ourselves to be exquisitely interconnected, then we're charged with the responsibility to attend to the quality of those relationships. That's when we begin to set the stage for personal well-being in our students, in ourselves, and genuine social change. So what can you do about the fact that this is so hard for our students and for us? You can remember that this is not the business of intellectual labor that we're in. It's emotional. Recognize and express your emotions and encourage your students to do the same. You can cut yourself some slack. That part of the reason why this is so hard is because we're not taught how to do it. Teaching or relationship building. You can work to change this. Professors are not taught how to teach or advise. Teaching and advising are not valued in the academy. The academy needs to recognize the time and space needed to teach and advise relationally. The academy can value service more and recognize that tending to the quality of the relationships we nurture with our advisees is the highest form of service. And it is one that benefits our students and us and the campus simultaneously. As Michelle was saying, be the human. Be the human for our students who are sucked into technology. Be their human. And be human first before being the professor, the chair, the dean, the PI, the advisor. Just be human. You can work to correct the bootstrapping fallacy. The pick yourself up by your bootstraps. When the pick yourself up by the bootstraps was said way back when in 18 something or other, it was said in jest. It was sarcastic. Can you imagine that? It was sarcastic. And somehow we all hold ourselves to that standard, that lonely, unachievable standard. It's impossible to pick yourself up by the bootstraps. You getting upright depends on other people. Students are taught that learning is their own responsibility, not a shared responsibility. So they're shame-prone and anxious about failing, and they're afraid to ask for help. Students need to be shown by your demonstration that life is about living interdependently, not independently. We need to teach them how to build relational networks, and we need to model it for them by building our own. You can protect yourself from burnout. You can ask for help when you need it, and you can model this for our advisees. Take care of yourself with others in relationship with others by tending to all your relationships in your life at home and on campus, including your advisees. And remember that relationships feed our spirit. You don't have to do this for your advisees. It's not something you give to them. You have the opportunity and the privilege to share in relationship with your advisees. And when you do, their spirit will soar, and so will yours, and so will ours. This is true relationality. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you very much for those meaningful remarks. Now, our third panelist, Wanda Carroll.
Thank you. My name is Wanda Carroll. I'm a lecturer in supply chain management and international business in the School of Business and Economics, and I am very pleased to join you today as a panelist to speak on how we can contribute much to a student's feeling of genuine welcome and deep care, and also their ability to learn, persist, and thrive. So it's important to find a meaningful way to say that we care about our learners and those we advise. So during my portion of this panel presentation, I'm going to focus on 3 areas where I strive to make relationships a priority. First, develop experiences and make meaningful relationships. A successful academic culture should value, as been mentioned, webs of human interaction, such as encouraging internships or maybe creating opportunities for students to meet with alumni. I know that employers are looking for graduates with experiences outside of the classroom. It's not about sitting in a classroom earning a decent GPA. It's much more than that. It includes, what did you do simultaneously outside of the classroom to apply your knowledge? For instance, student clubs, professional and community organizations. So about student clubs, I encourage advisees to attend club fairs, go to different club meetings, see what you like. Scroll through the list of clubs on the Student Clubs and Organizations page. Consider joining a club outside of your major to broaden your educational journey. On professional and community organizations, find a professional organization in your anticipated career field and then join it. There are many professional organizations that allow students to join for free. Get involved in a local community organization. So, story here. 2 business admin advisees of mine were interested in government criminal justice work. They were thinking of going in that direction. I introduced them to a contact at the Plattsburgh Police Explorers program. Both of the students were accepted. They loved it. They stuck with it and made great connections. Interestingly, both applied to the New York State Police, passed the evals and tests while they were also simultaneously finishing their business degree. I wrote letters of recommendation when they graduated, and this summer, the New York State Police Recruitment Office contacted me to verify their character. Could I give a reference? And yes, I did. Both SUNY grads are at the academy as we speak. Without those conversations to encourage them to seek out their dream career, get involved, make those professional connections, would they be where they are now? And if you ask them, they're going to tell you no. So that's one example. Second, seeking out the answers. So as advisors, we can cultivate students' interest to help them seek out the answers to these questions. I had an advisee who wanted the knowledge of the business degree, but she was feeling empty about what am I going to do with this? So we talked about her hobbies, volunteer work, things she was passionate about. Her answers kept circling back to the same thing, helping others, especially in nonprofit organizations. So I guided her in a few directions, asked her to do some research and come back and see me next week. So the following week, she was fired up. She wanted to say, I know what I want to do. You could hear her enthusiasm several offices down. She said, I'm going to finish my business degree. I'm going to get my MBA, and I'm going to find strategies to make nonprofits more efficient and successful. She told me she wanted more donations and monies going to the cause and not to administrative costs. There it is. That's the deeply held values. That's a mission. That's a purpose. This is why I'm going to college. And this is the person I want to become. She was so excited about her research. And the biggest part of that is she owned it. She created her new priority. She did graduate from SUNY Plattsburgh with her bachelor's in business administration. She went on to earn her MBA at NYU. I have not reconnected with her since last winter, but I know that she's on a path to make change. So, third thing, building personal connections. So whether students are here at college for the first time or returning for a new semester, I think of pre-start to post-completion as an entire care package. I check the athletic team rosters each semester for students I have in class or advise. And here's an example. I make it a point to send an encouraging message or attend an event. Recently, our homecoming exhibition game for men's hockey, I sent messages and attended both the Friday and Saturday events. They said, oh, we're going to look for you at the game and we'll even score a point for you. And they sent a message saying they saw me wave at them. They were so excited about it. And they said, did you see the point we scored for you? I was like, oh, okay. So for advisees, I send them messages before the semester begins. I tell them, I look forward to seeing you back on campus. I share something fun I did over the summer. I encourage them to tell me, what have you been up to? And although I hope every student reads their email, they don't. I do receive many replies back, some with great detail. I'm just happy to make the connection. Let them know I'm here. I'm ready to welcome you back. Care packages. These are a useful relationship maintenance tool for a drop-in the first week of classes. Students could be lonely, missing family members or loved ones, or be sad about something. It's a kind gesture to show I care about them. Little surprises like you see in the picture there, tissue packs, chicken ramen, some sweets, and I put a little note in there. Cardinal star notes at midterms, the thinking about you as you prepare for final emails. And I encourage drop-ins if they need someone to listen. So at the end of the spring semester, I had several advisees queued up for walk-in office hours. They were crying their upcoming finals and the stress and horrible group projects and the stress. Lots of referrals to the Learning Center for tutoring and for a few, the Student Health and Counseling Center to help them cope. By the way, I keep miniature bottles of water in my office refrigerator. So students start crying, I get that cold bottle of water because that cold sensation of the water stimulates other branches of facial nerves. And you can't cry and drink water at the same time. Try it. Finally, just using different forms of encouragement and emotional and tangible support really goes far to help build and deepen relationships over a student's academic journey while they're here at SUNY Plattsburgh. So I hope you found something to reflect on, to make your own, to build relationships with your advisee, and as a thoughtful way to say, we're glad you're here and we want you to know we care. So thank you, Elizabeth, for the time to share some of my favorite advising techniques and stories with our faculty and staff today.
Well, you are most welcome, and thank you for that. And so I'm going to segue from you and share a few closing, say 2.5 ahas, okay, that came out of the whole book experience for me, and they connect meaningfully to what you were saying, specifically, Wanda. So because our guest panelists shared a great deal, I'm chipping in just these couple of thoughts about immediate import of these ideas to our practice. We're going to be meeting with advisees for course advisement starting on Monday, and there are folks in this room in support roles, in student success, student support, and academic support roles here who can use the same. The biggest aha for me was I immediately flipped the transactional, and I'm using the word relational because the authors did, Kim McCoy-Coleman, and I flipped the relational and transactional. Before, what courses did you choose? How you doing in your courses? And here's your PIN code. It was 80% transactional and 20% relational, if I can make up those numbers. And now it's the other way around, especially the first time I'm meeting the advisee. It's so easy to say, how are classes going? How is your adjustment? Like, there's nothing inherently wrong with those questions, but it leads to the students saying, okay, pretty good, and then we move on. I ask all sorts of questions for, instead of how are you adjusting to college? Well, that's a big construct to unpack. Hey, you've been here for a couple weeks now. What's been the high point for you? What's been the low point? And go from there. Or what was your best day, your best moment, your worst moment? I ask them about their family system and their support system. Who supports you the most? What have you told them about college? What have you not told them about college? Interesting answers. What's really, really important to you? They sometimes don't know how to answer. Doesn't matter to me whether they go. One student recently grabbed the crucifix on his chest and said, that's very important to me. And another person said, my friend's from back home. And we go from there. What do you do when you're not in classes? It stuns them that you even want to know this information. Very telling. When have you felt the most successful in your life? What's the greatest asset you have? Now, I don't read these to them like it's a job interview. It isn't, but it just flows in the conversation and you get more out of it. And I downright ask people now, do you have people here? Do you have a person? And some say yes and some say no. And I say, well, guess what? Now you do. I'm going to be your person. Until a better offer comes around, I don't have an ego attached. I'm going to be your person. And there's sometimes this great relief. So I linger on the big questions and not rush through the superficial ones. And I get a lot more from that. It only takes, I made a note on my book in one of my chapters. It was in my own writing. It only takes one interaction to determine the rest. I don't know if it's a quote from the book or something profound that Jessamine Newhouse said when she was leading the group. I have no idea, but it's true. It only takes one interaction to determine the rest. The second and a half I wanted to take and I applied to advising right away is this. See, one of the first challenges associated with relationship-rich education is always, but I have high enrolled classes. I have a mega advisee load. I'm overcommitted. Our panelists talked about this. That's the beauty of this. I'm not talking about establishing a one-on-one mentor relationship with every person under your tutelage or in your caseload. You could be their person. And I know that you are the person for some people, students on this campus. I know that. So you could be their person, and that's really awesome. But you also might be a conduit for students to find people who will join their webs of significance. And I spelled it that's not a typo. I spelled it that way. Okay. You could be a conduit for their web of significance, to role model, to use your own web of significance on this campus for them, lead them to Sally Urban in the Career Development Center, lead them to Karen Killow in the Learning Center, lead them to David Dupree for English language learning, lead them. And then they build their webs of significance. But one of my favorite concepts in this whole book was, or you could be a mentor of the moment, or it was mentor for the moment. I'm not sure which, forgive me. A mentor for the moment. So some of the most powerful interactions come from the fact that you have a brush with a person. You've crossed paths in some way, and you provided just the right thing at just the right moment. It was neither a continuous relationship to be had, nor was it expected, but it was impactful and significant. You just hit it right then and there, and students remember that, and you may never know that you hit it. You've been a mentor for the moment. One of the final reflection I'll share, co-author Leo Lambert came away from this project stunned by something. How many students were one conversation away from dropping out? One conversation away. And you might be the conversation that reduces doubt or affirms something they needed. So that got me thinking. If the number 2 reason for personal withdrawals is to be closer to home, knowing full well that there's health reasons for closer to home, financial reasons to be closer to home, and so on. For those who just miss home, it is a lot harder to miss home. Love, caring, support, feeling good, feeling joy. If you feel meaningful connection here, especially those who might have additional obstacles because fewer people look like them. So we have much we can do and much we can change in this regard. I realize it is 9:52 already. My goodness. So I will remain here. Panelists may remain here for a couple minutes. I'm not sure of their commitments. But is there anyone in this space who has a question or has a reaction to what was shared that you would like to bravely say at this time?
Hello, everyone. I have one. I'm going to be working with a lot of students in online programs, so I may not have the opportunities to cross paths with them in a physical sense. And so do you have any specific recommendations for building relationship-rich interactions with students who, may be remote or, in a distance learning environment?
I can answer part of that. And of course, Kim, if you do online, I teach in the online accounting degree program for statewide for SUNY, and also do many online courses, including with an exchange program for 3 years in China. So building relationships with students can be challenging. I think from the introductory exercises, the get to know you, when I ask them to share something unique about themselves, I respond to the students and then I follow up with them. And then I use that to continue the conversations through the semester. If I see them struggling or if I feel they need a little boost, I'll say, hey, I've been thinking about you. I remember the Zoom meeting we had where you had all the plants in the background. How is that going? Just to try to bring them in. Yeah, it takes some work. I mean, in the classes, I have 48 students in an online class. So, but I do monitor some of those I think are starting to disappear or fade. And that seems to bring them right back in.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Chris, and for your response. You were the best respondent for that one, Wanda, for sure. Ken Baldwin, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you so much for organizing this.
You're welcome, Ken.
Really good, really great. Hi, Chris. This is Ken. I just got your email about scheduling a meeting. I believe that's you, right?
I think I got one of those messages out to you. I can't remember what it exactly said, but yeah, we got to link up at some point.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say what Chris had referenced, how do you stay in touch with somebody that's an online learner? And, it's been an interesting process. I've been overseeing the online mastery and fitness wellness leadership now for 6 years. And I'll just give you a couple examples so you have an idea of how you can help these students. So one of my students in June contacted me about a course that he was taking with me this fall, Fit 590 self-assessment and fitness course. And he asked me, he and his wife were planning to have a new baby that was going to be due in September. And he asked me if it would be possible for me to send him the required textbook, homework assignments, written projects, everything possible in advance. And so I told him, I said, look, I'm going to be updating the course, but around July 1st, I should have everything all set up. And so I reached out to him and said, look, I got everything ready for you so that you can start. Because his main concern was that having their first baby, he wanted to be available to help out as much as possible as he could, and help out because his wife was going to be tired and exhausted, and I totally understood. So that's one example. And then another example is I have another student who is getting induced this weekend for having a baby. And she reached out first week of the semester and asked if I could open up all the quizzes, midterm exam and exam that showed, so she could start early on them, because she was already, she'd already been in the degree program for about 2 semesters. So she knew kind of how the course was set up, and we usually release the quizzes and exams during a 1-week period of time. So they're all kind of, they would, let's say quiz 1 would be due the first week of school by Sunday midnight. So what I did for her was I opened up all the quizzes so that as she read through the chapters, went through the lectures and presentations, she could take all the quizzes, midterms, and final exams at her own pace, so that she didn't have to wait for them to open up. And so amazingly, she told me she was working about 50 hours a week to read ahead. She got all of her quizzes done, a midterm, all by last weekend. I mean, it's just a tremendous amount of work to go through, to read an entire book, study, and get that done. But those are the things that I found, because our students aren't usually undergrad. They usually have families and they're working full time. So you have to kind of be available to help them as much as possible. So I just wanted to share that with everybody and Chris.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Ken, very much. And those are great illustrations about putting the human first. The student stuff falls into place when you put the students first. So I'm going to close, because we have another session starting at 10. Is I want to pick up on something that Kim said, and it's very important to me. We're already in relationship with people. And so relationship-rich education, a relationship-rich culture, is about recognizing that, and recognizing and doing everything we can to facilitate relationshiping for students in a wider sense, actually encouraging that. And I am so gratified by the fact that you are in my web of significance here on this campus. I thank you to the presenters. Thank you for those who asked questions and who answered them. I'm just going to take a 1-minute break here. I'm going to stop the recording momentarily and get ready for our next session, which is AAA Help, Ask Advising Anything. And we have our special guest already in the room, Interim Director of Financial Aid, Carrie Lubo. So thank you very much, and I'll see you in a minute. All right. Well, thank you for being here with us, Carrie. We receive a number of questions from advisors about financial aid.
In terms of personnel, do you have a graduate advisor in the financial aid office, or is everybody kind of a generalist?
Yeah, we all definitely do everything. We have 3 financial aid advisors, Corey, David, and Angela. They do have alpha designations for paperwork processing, but we've always been the office, which is different in other financial aid departments at other colleges. We don't do appointments. We have open business hours now, 8 to 4. Used to be 8:30 to 4, but 8 to 4 now. Students just walk in and say, I would like to meet with a financial aid advisor, and they get to meet with a financial aid advisor. So we don't actually even advertise the alpha split, because we don't want students to think that they can only see Corey or only see Angela. Everybody has to, because of the nature of our profession, has to have full awareness of financial aid opportunities, whether it's graduate student, undergraduate student. students who are no longer students but still have loan obligations, such as what's going on in the world right now with the new debt cancellation. So we all need to be aware of every aspect of financial aid, and then to a limited degree, advising and registration and everything else. And of course, we do the billing also. So at the moment, there has not been a need to have a specific individual coordinating or liaising for graduate concerns. That very well could change as the growth continues in that population with online or just in general. And we will take that guidance. If you find that that's a growing concern and students would rather have a particular designee, let us know, and we'll take that under advisement. But the aid is fairly limited. There are situations, although more unique than an undergraduate student, more family growth circumstances that they experience, and career influences to their degree pursuits. Their financial aid processing is done the same way as an undergraduate student. So we haven't yet identified the need to have a particular liaison.
Okay. Thank you. If I may ask just one more quick follow-up. You mentioned that graduate students, there are state and Fed government grants for students in teaching degree. Which one would that qualify for?
Yeah, so the federal government has what they call the Federal Teach Grant. New York State has a Teach Award as well, very rarely used. The Federal Teach Grant is more commonly used by our students. It's something we package as part of their financial aid award package. We actually designate it, we call it the Federal Teach Grant Loan is how we advertise it, because it is a grant with the expectation that students fulfill certain requirements post-graduation. So within 8 years of completing their degree, they must teach at least 4 of those 8 years in a school that is designated as high need by the U.S. Department of Education and are teaching at a full-time level in a curriculum that is designated as high need. Both designations, the school districts and the schools that are qualified as high need, as well as the teaching curriculums, are listed on the federal government's website, not updated very consistently or regularly, I should say, but it is a grant. And then in that 8-year time frame post-college where they are sort of being tracked, their employment is sort of being tracked. If they are unable to fulfill the 4 of 8-year requirement, their grant converts to an interest-bearing loan with back interest due. So we advertise it as a Teach Grant Loan, just in the hopes that that might spur people's attention. And then when they go to complete the Teach Service contract on the federal government's website, maybe they then see the connection between what we've said and what the service contract says, which is, if you don't do this, you now owe us money. Not sure how much they notice that, but the vast majority of grants do end up converting to loans. So we want to be as transparent as we can.
That's really great, Carrie. That's really responsible advising by you and your team. All right, last question about this. With the Federal Teach Grant Loan opportunity, are there typically enough opportunities for students who want to, teach at least 4 years in these high need districts, or is there a shortage of opportunities there?
There are not a shortage of opportunities to teach in high need schools. Just about every school in the North Country qualifies as high need. There, I think, was an impression that it was only inner city schools and things like that, but the list is generous, big, for the schools that qualify. The problem comes to be where you have to teach in a full-time in a high need curriculum, and they have changed the curriculums over the year. The curriculum can vary based on school district or region and state. So oftentimes the only high need curriculum might be English as a second language, or maybe math or something like that. And as you know, in this area, I don't know elsewhere, but in this area, a teacher may be hired to be an English teacher, but half of their day could be spent teaching homeroom and special curriculums and study halls and everything else. So that's where it gets tricky for students, not being able to meet the full-time curriculum expectation, not as much the school district. And they do have 8 years to fulfill 4 years. So that does give you some flexibility, but it's difficult. So what we usually advise students is, I would picture your financial aid award package without the Teach Grant. If you weren't being offered the Teach Grant, would you be borrowing the federal unsubsidized loan, which is an interest-bearing loan? Would you be borrowing the loan to help with your college costs? If they answer the question, yes, I would be borrowing a loan anyway, I don't have other resources to do this, then there's really no harm in taking the grant, right? Because they were going to take a loan instead. The ones who say, yeah, no, I have resources, or I'm going to just try to do this with my own money, or, I'm going to do it another way, they're the ones that I would more caution. Then it's, a bit risky to take this grant because of its future expectations.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I would like to ask a question on behalf of advisors campus-wide. It's an easy one. When students say they have Excelsior and they want to drop classes, do not roll your eyes at me, Carrie Lubel. Okay. And so, because we're right here upon academic advising period, course advising period. And so if a student wants to drop classes, and we know the general rule, they need to complete 30 credits, earn 30 credits in a year. Could you tell us more about that? What happens if they don't? What is a year?
Yeah. So a year is 365 days from the start date or the start semester of the beginning of an academic cycle for them. So the state says the minute you become a matriculated student and start attending college, 1 year begins. And then after that 365, a second year begins. So for most students, a year begins with the fall term.
Yeah.
Because that's when they began matriculated study. And they have fall, winter, spring, and summer to earn the 30 credits. They get a notification from us following the conclusion of the fall semester that tells them how many credits they've earned and what the expectation is from the state. They get another notice from us in April that says summer, enrollment, enrollment opportunities are soon here, and this is where you're at in your progression towards your Excelsior expectations, and then we notify them again in June. So, there is plenty of advising that they need to hit the 30 credits. If they do not, unfortunately, what happens is they not only lose all future funding in the program, there's no way to regain your standing, but also the tougher part, well, that's tough, I suppose, but also what New York State does is they take away the most recent funded term. So the spring award that the student has already received, it's already been used to pay the spring bill. It's now June, July, August, September. That money goes away, and now they have a bill with the school, a prior due balance. And that's very unfortunate.
With financial aid, I live and learn. And what you just said, and why I prompted you with that question, is I want advisors to know that as well.
Yeah.
We all toss around on campus the terms, oh, you could lose aid. And that isn't a thing, that it doesn't mean the same thing in all contexts. A student might not necessarily lose aid for whatever the situation is. With Excelsior, you lose it in the future, for the future, and you also need to pay back the most recent past. I wanted to ask a follow-up question about the concept of, well, you could lose aid and the advice that we may give. When a student comes to their course advising appointment and wishes to drop a class, and they are at 13 credits and they're dropping to 10, or 15 and dropping to 12, whatever it is, would you expand a little bit about that? I mean, some advisors, rightly so, send the student or ask the student to call or meet with financial aid or to ask questions. But I always caution advisors not to just blanket say, oh, you're beneath 12, you're going to lose aid.
Yeah.
Could you tell us, advisors, a couple extra considerations? What happens when
Yeah.
we send students to you?
Yeah, we really appreciate that, and we're grateful for that opportunity, because there are times that both of the scenarios you present could be cause financial aid complications for the students. Generally speaking, a student does not want to go below 12 credits because, for example, recipients of any New York State grant program, not scholarship, but grant program, is required after they've been in attendance for 4 semesters to complete 12 credits in advance of their next payment. So a student who has a New York State grant in the fall starts out in 15 credits, goes down to 10, starts out in 12 credits, goes down to 9, whatever the scenario is, and does not take winter session courses will lose their next grant award. So we like the opportunity to talk to them, although we will not necessarily say don't withdraw from the course, because that's not our job. If it's the right thing for them to do, the course withdrawal, then that's the right thing for them to do. But we may say it's going to impact your $3,000 scholarship, so you may want to consider taking a winter course. And then we can continue that conversation. Well, how will I pay for a winter course and things like that? Which adds its own layer of complications. Sometimes there is no ramification initially. A student in 12 credits that goes to 9, that is only in their second semester of study, may still be on progress with the New York State expectations. So it does not impact their next cycle of funding. Generally speaking, the federal government and the state government expect students to earn somewhere between 66.7 and 75% of all coursework they take. So a student who habitually withdrawals from coursework, eventually those habits can impact future financial aid. So again, the opportunity for us to put eyes on a student's record, and we may be looking at the same thing you're looking at, but we're looking at it from our perspective, gives us the chance to say, you're at 70% completion. That's really close to that 66.7. If you want to keep getting your Pell Grant and your student loans, you may not want to do that course withdrawal, or you may really want to think about summer classes. And sometimes the way, again, the perspective we see things could conflict with the advice that they've received on the advising side. And that's certainly not our intent. We more just want the students to be informed of the ramifications, the financial ramifications of their course decisions. It is up to the student and the student's advisor to decide what is correct for their curriculum activity, but money plays a factor.
Yeah, it really does. I know that we are just about expiring the time that I asked of you this morning. And so may I ask one final question of you? And that is, do you ever hear of, let's say, accidental misadvice from the academic side?
Yeah.
That you sometimes need to amend when you're working with a student? So because we don't want to do harm by our good intentions as academic advisors.
As us, the same, and I would never actually call it misadvice, because just as I don't know everything about a student's degree expectations and the major that they're in, or majors and minors and all that, you're intentionally not allowed to know about the student's financial aid and what awards they're receiving and the implications of those awards. So I think sometimes there's a disconnect, but it's not intentional on anybody's part. Honestly, the one situation that is really complicated for students is when they're being advised or seeking advice on the intent to maybe do several majors or a major and several minors. And we expect the students to be taking certain coursework that is degree required. A minor and a second major usually is not degree required. So there's sometimes a little bit of disconnect between what we're saying and what the student desires as far as their academic goals and the advising that they're receiving for those desires. Again, it's nobody's intent, but it can get complicated for students doing multiple majors or minors doing very late changes in majors, like once they're already a junior and beyond, can get very complicated for financial aid. So those are definitely students where we appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation with them. Let us, tell us what your goals are, and let's see if we can try to make it work within the constraints of your financial aid resources.
Thank you so much, number one, Carrie, for your willingness to be here. And secondly, the financial aid office is really easy to work with, and it can be very humbling for faculty who know little except from their own experience with financial aid, from their own education. It can be really humbling, and you make it easy for us, and you are among the most professionally generous offices that we have worked with. So I thank you. And if faculty advisors have other questions, we'll send them to Student Financial Services.
Well, and if I may, thank you for the kind words, but I'd like to reciprocate, because many of you know less than 10 years ago, there wasn't as much information sharing between the advising side of the house and the financial aid side of the house. It wasn't necessary, and I think we all were very happy with that. And it's become necessary in more recent years, and we are so grateful for your patience, because we don't know enough about what you all do and the importance of what you all do. So thank you for being patient with us as we interact with your students in a little bit of a different way, and sometimes need your help making sure we all end up on the same page.
That's right. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Yeah.